Well, good morning, everybody, and I'm really excited for the panel, and I'm going to kick all of us off here with a softball question: Are EVs just for elitist Californians? Why should mainstream consumers pay any attention?
Well, I can go first. You know, as the EV market grows and the variety of vehicles become available, it really is just an exciting opportunity for everyone to have zero emission transportation. It is absolutely critical. There's no way we can meet our climate change goals without everyone having access to clean transportation. We need that infrastructure so folks feel comfortable knowing that they'll be able to charge wherever they can. And we need everyone to experience the fun of driving electric vehicles. I mean, electric vehicles are way more fun to drive than ICE vehicles. And so I think as people see them more in ride sharing, as they see them more as their friends start to acquire them, I think folks are going to realize that there's huge opportunities. And at CARB, we're committed to making sure that our incentive programs and the work we do with our partners like panels like this and work with our NGOs like Valley Can in the San Joaquin Valley to show that everyone can drive an electric vehicle and everyone can be part of the transformation.
I'll jump in and reinforce that a little bit. I think a lot of this is, there's a lot of noise about consumer adoption. I don't think that consumers have issues en masse with adopting EVs. Sure, it's going to take a while to climb the mass market curve attitudinally, but there's more demand than there is supply, and that's the issue. The issue is there's not one size fits all. You're not going to take someone who drives a pickup truck and present them with a compact car or a luxury car that they can't afford and transition them into it. But now you're seeing the makes and models come. If you look at the Ford F-150 Lightning that just got introduced, look at the number of back orders they had immediately on that truck, and you couldn't hit the center of the bullseye in the United States with more of an iconic vehicle than that one. It's the most popular truck in the United States, and trucks and SUVs are over half our cars. So as supply gets rolling, as these things come out, as they move down the price curve, and more importantly, as a used car market develops as well for electric vehicles, I think you're going to see demand, frankly, outstrip the automotive industry's ability to transition their supply chains fast enough to build electric vehicles. So I don't think this is a California phenomenon at all. We were just ahead with great incentives here in the state with great leadership. And I think that's just why you see more penetration here, but I don't think it's certainly a phenomenon that's unique to us.
And Peter, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
Well, I think there are two big obstacles to widespread adoption of EVs. One has been range anxiety. I think we're addressing that with Lucid Air's coming to market, 500-mile range. Goodbye to range anxiety. I think we've addressed that one. I think its price point to entry is the real big hurdle that I'm laser focused upon. And I think there's got to be a cognizance here that is dependent upon not just the battery costs and the mass industrialization of battery cells, but also efficiency. And that is a technology race. And I see the role of technology as tech companies create more efficient electric cars so it can go further with a given battery size. This is the thing that's overlooked. Let's stimulate that tech race here in the US, and that tech race will lead to better cars, but primarily it'll push the price point down. And it's that price point to entry that's really going to be the catalyst for the widespread adoption.
Peter, speaking of range anxiety, I mean, in your experience, is there a magic number that consumer has in mind? You know, if the car can go 300 miles per charge, then it's good enough, then I'm good to go. Or is it more of a charging network related concern? I mean, and I'm going to ask Pat, after you.
Yeah, I think it's all those things. This is not a binary solution. This is much more nuanced. The more range, the better. But the real issue is the cost of range. how much does it cost to build and sell a car with X amount of range? And that is not a function merely of the cost of batteries. It's a function of how efficient and how high tech that car is. Can we make a car with 150 mile range, say, for $25,000? That to me would be the future. And then to do that, we need the stars to align. We need the infrastructure with fast charging everywhere. We need cell chemistry that's tolerant to repeated cyclic fast charging without degradation. We need to industrialize battery manufacture so that we can get maybe to $90 per kilowatt hour, so certainly sub 100. And we also need to increase efficiency, and we need the stimulus for companies like Lucid to really create this tech race here in the US, actually specifically in the state of California. And it's that tech race that's going to drive the price down. To start with, the tech race is just going to make better cars and more range. But the ultimate goal of that tech race is to drive the price down to make EVs accessible to all. And that is my passion.
How does charging network play into range anxiety?
So I think so. Let's start with the headline, and then let's burrow into that a little bit. The headline is that the problem set that you see is consumers are pattern matching on their behavior with their gasoline cars, and that's natural. They drive around till the little yellow light comes on, and they go somewhere to reload their gas tank. So they're assuming that they're going to live life that way. But electric vehicles, because electricity is pervasively available because it's not an environmentally regulated substance, the key is to have, as Peter was saying, great fast charge to deal with the use case of driving beyond your battery range. Because while that isn't something we as consumers do every day, we need to see that ability, because we'll worst case test our purchase against the ability to do things that are relatively infrequent. The analogy I use is, how many SUVs have an off-road package that never got used? It's just people buy to the worst case. So that's why we have to do that. And we also have to deal with the early consumer sentiment of pattern matching on gas stations. So when we talk about range and we talk about charging, what I always do to surprise, a random consumer that I'm sitting next to in an airport or what have you, is the problem is, this is the search engine for a charger, not this. And gasoline was born where your eyeballs were the search engine. So big canopies, signs with the little knife and fork on the highway, and then right next to it, a little picture of a gas pump. Well, now in your in-car navigation system and on your mobile app, it tells you where they are, so you don't have to make the infrastructure as conspicuous. The problem is, if it's not conspicuous, the existing consumers that are driving conventional cars that are used to using their eyeballs as a search engine don't realize that things are there. So what I tell them is, just download our mobile app, type in any random address that you want, it'll center the map there, and you'll see how many chargers are around you, no matter where you are in the country. And they're shocked. They're always shocked at how many are there. And even the ones that are not on the map, like workplace chargers or private chargers at retailers that want to reserve them for their customers, et cetera, that may not show up on maps, those things are there. They're not conspicuous, but the minute that you can access them, you'll see them on our maps and in the in-dash navigation systems that we feed. So what happens is this awareness needs to unfold. And I think the best way to unfold it is to just keep talking, keep getting the information out there. And then as people and as consumers start driving vehicles, their friends and neighbors will start to understand their pattern changes, and it'll catch fire.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I've recently taken a road trip in my EV, and it was a surprisingly easy experience. Speaking of driving on road trips, Liane, I wanted to ask you the next question. Are you seeing a friendly competition developing between California and perhaps other states that are also coming up with incentive programs to promote EV adoption? And what is it looking like out there?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of states who have committed to similar goals as California, states like Connecticut and Maine and Massachusetts and New Mexico, New Jersey. New York is investing more than $1 billion in zero-emission cars, trucks, buses, and ZEV fueling infrastructure. North Carolina Oregon has set a goal for at least 90% of new motor vehicles sold to be zero emission by 2035, Rhode Island, Washington, and most importantly, the federal government is now stepping up. And with the new administration, in fact, in April, governors of several states, including California and many of the states I mentioned, sent a letter to the Biden administration asking them to adopt aggressive goals in this area and infrastructure. And, the latest infrastructure deal does include funding for zero emission vehicles and infrastructure. So I think that there's going to be a huge jumpstart in this space all over the country, and we'll start seeing vehicles and infrastructure roll out across the country and really create the markets that we need to build the variety of vehicles, as we were talking about earlier, that are so important to get all kinds of drivers into zero emission vehicles.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing up the infrastructure plan that Biden apparently announced, that there is now a bipartisan support for his infrastructure plan. But one of the criticisms, Liane, for electric vehicles is this narrative that we're leaving out the lower income communities. I mean, what can we do as we design these infrastructure plans or otherwise so that we can better fit the lower income communities?
Yeah, that's something we are very, very focused on at CARB. And so our approach in getting to the governor's 2035 100% light duty vehicle sales, zero emission, has a lot of components. And each one of those components focuses on equity as a part of it. So in the incentive space, we are making sure that we are ensuring that a large percentage of our incentives go to low and moderate income drivers. On the regulatory side, as we are requiring manufacturers to produce electric vehicles, we're also requiring those vehicles to be durable. We are, as we're building our Advanced Clean Fleet 2 regulation, we're looking at what the battery requirement should be in terms of longevity, and very importantly, what the disclosure of health of those batteries should be. What are the onboard diagnostics that we're going to need to require so that as cars are moving into the used car market, that they are durable and folks know what they're buying. It's really important for us to recognize that a good 70% of people buy used cars, not new cars, right? And so we have to make sure that that used car market is robust, that our incentive programs and programs like Clean Cars for All, where you can get rid of an old clunker and get a cleaner vehicle, that those provide opportunities for used cars to be in the hands of folks. And the regulatory strategy needs to be linked to that so that we have the right requirements to ensure a transparent used car market in the battery electric vehicle space. So all of those are, and then, the last thing I'll mention is around infrastructure, because it's also important to think about how do people who do not have individual charging in their single family home charge. So multi-unit dwellers, people who charge at work, people who might prefer to charge while they're running their errands, people who might have the opportunity to charge. Maybe the charger's not in the garage of their multi-unit dwelling, but it's a block or two away, so they can easily set it to charge, go back, and then go grab it later. So there's a lot of options, but we really need to be focused on where we're putting those chargers so that drivers have access.
Yeah, Liane, you're absolutely right. I mean, multi-unit dwelling traditionally has been a really difficult area to install chargers. So it's a challenge, but perhaps it's also an opportunity for public charging. So Pat, what have been your observations around this area?
So you know how the pandemic has been a blessing and a curse at the same time for a lot of businesses, because it's taught us all some very valuable lessons. One of the things is our multifamily business shot through the roof for exactly the reasons that Liane is referring to, is the people that used to have access to charging at work, but suddenly weren't going to work. And so if you're not going to work and you live in an apartment, you may assumption when you bought your EV that you were going to have access to work. You didn't necessarily take into account the fact that a pandemic was going to hit. It's a black swan event. So the multifamily programs, landlords have been getting behind it, but more importantly, I think what really works, in California has done a wonderful job at this, is marrying a utility program to what we offer as a charging as a service program. So for us, the last little bit of the installation of the unit and any ongoing fees, we build a tenant much like you would bill a tenant for internet access or phone or whatever other services that are in the apartment complex. And if you marry that with a utility program or a state incentive program to help do the electrical upgrades, the one-time electrical upgrades at the site, because you didn't contemplate that much power being needed in the parking garage, you were thinking lights, you weren't thinking fuel for a vehicle. Once those utility upgrades go in, we handle the rest. And it fits the economic model of how an apartment investor or REIT would look at how they don't want any non-rentable CapEx. They don't want to have to build improvements in their common areas, and they certainly don't want to have to build improvements in their common areas where all the tenants don't participate, because they build it into everyone's rent. So it's an administratively impossible thing to deal with. That's why our charging as a service program doesn't actually bill the landlord for anything except for the utility upgrades on the site. And if we can get those covered, and that's I think a reasonable redefinition of what line extension is for a utility, and the utility regulators get comfortable with that, we can benefit a utility because they get increased CapEx in their rate base for good reason. We get more volume flowing through the network, so rates should drop over time. As you know, keep it in energy forever. And then what you also get is companies like ours that deal with the rest and turn it into a charging as a service model, where the rest of the CapEx, the charger and the last bit of installation, is we just put it on our balance sheet and then bill the driver monthly. And so it all works. You can make it work. You just have to get all the pieces together. And I have very good confidence in our state to lead the way there with the example.
Yeah, Pat, I mean, there are definitely new business models that are emerging as electrification adopts, charging as a service you mentioned, but also transportation as a service, just kind of rolling into a big bundle, including the vehicles. I was just curious for the panelists. I mean, how do you think, vehicle ownerships overall will evolve as electric vehicles come out, as autonomous vehicles come out? Are we going to own cars anymore? Peter, you want to take that one to kick us off?
I'm very bullish about electric cars. I'm quite bearish about autonomous cars. They ain't going to come anytime soon, believe you me. So I think there's a whole new arena of opportunity there with the EV. But just to follow back to the last point, though, I actually believe absolutely very valid points. There's too much focus upon fast charging infrastructure. 95% of charging is done at AC level at home. And that's where we need to have more incentives for people who don't have the access to their garage, that people who park on the street. Why couldn't we have, with parking meters, an integrated parking meter and charger so you can actually charge on the street outside your house? Places like San Francisco. This is really an amazing opportunity. And the US has an amazing opportunity here because we can incorporate V2G, two-way charging, to help balance the grid. And our cars are two-way charge enabled to help that balancing process. The other thing is about the incentives. I think rather than create this sort of artificial construct of the federal tax incentive towards purchase of a car, which is an artificial construct, what we should be doing is catalyzing the technology providers like Lucid Motors to create cars which are more cost effective in the first place. And that's what the world needs.
Peter, just so you know, all the parking meter functionality is built into our chargers. So they're very easily, they'll do parking. They'll even report to enforcement if you want to do an API integration. The technology is already here. The issue here is municipality, when it gets down to the administration of a municipal government in a city or town, as to who owns the problem and is there a budget there for that. And obviously we have charging as a service business models where we can actually with no appropriations risk overhang, do a annual fee inclusive of the CapEx for municipalities. So we've got the programs. The problem is getting and this is something that I think CARB can help us with, is getting at the state level some coordination between towns to do street side and some coordination with utilities on the infrastructure side. I think if we put that together, Peter, we solve the problem that you're articulating. But I'm dead with you. By the way, if it does go autonomous, and I agree with you, it's a long way out. I've been in the backseat of one of your early prototypes. It's an awful nice place to be.
Thank you. Thank you.
Liane, any thoughts on shared ownership of vehicles and pay vehicle transportation as a service?
Yeah, well, I have to say that as CARB looks at sustainability overall statewide, reducing vehicle miles traveled is a big goal of ours. So we are more than happy to have folks move away from individual vehicles because we need to make transportation. We need much more variety in transportation. We need folks to not do every trip by themselves in their vehicle. We need them using transit. We need them using bikes. We need the infrastructure to support bikes, whether they're electric or regular bikes. We need car sharing opportunities. And so our Sustainable Transportation Equity Program provides incentives to local governments and organizations to explore those options and to support those options in their communities and to really build a more sustainable experience, because there's way too much real estate in this state that is taken up by parking and roads.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes left. So I want you to take us home. Over the next several years, what can we expect at the California state level as far as changes or incentive programs and as this market evolve?
Well, we have a huge infusion on the way. The governor has proposed billions of dollars in incentives and infrastructure. We have the governor's office of Business and Economic Development, colloquially known as GoBiz, who's working very hard to coordinate all of the state agencies and also working with local governments as well to get these vehicles both in the light duty space and importantly in the heavy duty space, because that has such huge air quality and equity benefits, and getting vehicles on the road that are zero emission.
Very good. I think heavy duty is a really important segment for fleets. I mean, a lot of attention on passengers for sure, rightly so. But I think fleets and heavy duty and delivery fleets, and I think that segment, deserves a lot of attention in the years ahead.
Absolutely.
Anybody have any closing thoughts? We got 30 seconds left. I'm watching the clock.
I'm very excited for the future. It's going to go electric faster than anyone believes. It's going to brave new world. I leave with a sense of relentless optimism.
I'm with you, Peter, 100%. I think we've both been in this, for well over a decade. ChargePoint's going to be 14 years old next month. We're just all of us in this industry we've been warming up for a decade and a half. We're ready now. And it feels funny in that we're now, our industry collectively, not just infrastructure, but charging and leading edge governments like Liane's, we're suddenly rock stars. And we're like, wait a minute, we're the same people we were 10 years ago. We thought we're crazy, but we're not crazy now, right? It's not crazy. So I think there's a lot of upside. I'm with Peter. It's going to go faster than you think.
Well, thank you everybody for your excellent thoughts and leadership in the space. And I'll turn it over to the program. Thank you.